156.092D. And number 2, to allow a reduction in the minimum separation between multiple drive aisles to 10 feet rather than the 25 feet required in section 156.092, section E. And number 3, to allow a combined aggregate drive aisle width of 28 feet where a maximum of 24 feet is permitted in section 156.092, section E. Pin 99-500-64-86364. Sandy, Joe.
I think Joe's going to give the presentation from here. We're trying to get the monitors to work right now, but they're not operating correctly right now, so till then, we have a small crowd, so.
All right, Mr. Chairman, you did a good job of explaining the intent of what we're here tonight. The applicant has submitted a special use permit, and it's really 3 requests in one, as you described. So before we start getting into details, I did want to note for the record that we did properly advertise this public meeting, both in the local paper as well as mailing notices to the applicant and all adjoining owners. We posted a sign on the property. There was also notice was posted here at Town Hall and on the town's website. So I'll begin with describing the property. You'll note that this is a residential lot in the Soundsea Village neighborhood. It's surrounded entirely by other residential lots in that neighborhood, most of which are developed already. There is one vacant parcel where, that isn't developed, but otherwise, basically everything around this property is a developed single-family residential neighborhood. And so when you look at attachment A in your package and those maps, that's what that shows. The property was recently developed with a single-family residence, as well as the accompanying improvements like the driveway and parking that you're looking at tonight. So when the property owner got around to, completing the project and submitting an as-built survey, it showed several inconsistencies with the town's ordinance in regard to the location of parking, as well as things like driveway width. And the applicant has opted to seek relief from the planning board for those things. So the staff has issued a temporary certificate of occupancy for the house, since there's really no other issues, and the applicant was trying to address the issues through this permit process. So we issued a temporary CO for the property, and that's why you see it occupied now. We've highlighted the applicable sections of the ordinance in your staff report on page 2, but I want to jump over, and I guess really what we're looking at are the special use permit criteria and whether or not the proposal complies with those criteria. So I did want to outline those and walk through that and give you staff's opinion on, how we feel those are met or not. And ultimately, the planning board and town council will make that decision. So the first one is that the use meets all conditions and specifications of the ordinance, other than the items being requested of you. This project did comply with all the other development standards of the town. Second item, the use does not materially endanger the public health or safety. In evaluating the situation, staff found that the allowances for the reduced standards would not change the function, how this property operates or functions, and would not change the intensity of use on the site. And so we found that it would not impact adjoining properties or otherwise endanger the public health or safety. Third criteria, the use would not substantially injure the value of adjoining property. And again, similarly, it's developed with the single-family residence, like the properties around it, and just the nature of the parking and access, we didn't feel that there would have any impact on the value of the adjoining properties or surrounding neighborhoods. So again, we felt that that was met. Fourth, the use should be in harmony with the area and in general conformity with the town's adopted comprehensive and CAMA land use plan. We do go into some more detail on the land use plan later in the staff report. I'm not going to go over that in great detail. But we did want to note that the use of the property is consistent with the cottage residential character type that is in that this property and the neighborhood are in. And we did note that, really a great deal of the reason why the applicant chose to lay out the parking and driveways like he did is to preserve existing mature trees on the property, and we found that that is consistent with the land use plan. The main difference we had, though, here is where we begin to separate, and that we found that the parking, as far as, again, we have three things they're requesting. We found that the location of the parking spaces and the minimum separation between the drives was impacted by the ability to save the mature trees. However, we did not find that that same justification held true for the width of the driveways. If anything, you could make a counter argument that a wider driveway has more an impact on the trees than a narrower one. So we found, I guess you would say, in favor of the first two requests, but not the third in that regard. In addition, there are other criteria in town code that relate specifically to special use permits. for parking and loading. So one of those was, well, that it would not result in increased traffic congestion or otherwise negatively impact traffic flow or safety. And again, we noted that this would not increase the intensity of use on the site as far as the vehicles coming and going, and did not feel that it would impact, that it would result in increased congestion or decreased safety. And there was another one that it would be contrary to the Cameron land use plan, that it will not be contrary. We already addressed that. Another one is that it is necessary to permit the reasonable use of the subject property. While it's difficult to say that it would be necessary to permit that reasonable use, the allowances are necessary to save the trees as part of this while developing the property for that use. And then the final criteria, that it would not adversely impact adjacent properties or the surrounding area. And as we discussed earlier, we did not find that there would be any major impact, as a result of granting the requested criteria or the requested special use permit. So staff is recommending, when we get down, as we went through the details on things we need to look at, as I touched on earlier, staff is recommending approval. We found there was justification to consider approval of the parking space setback and the minimum separation between the drive aisles. However, we did not find that same justification to support an increase in the aggregate driveway width to 28 feet as opposed to the 25 permitted. So we have sort of a split recommendation in that way. And that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you or the board members might have.
I will. Dave, you might be looking for the pacifier. I think your wife was looking for it already. Joe, I don't remember any single-family residences coming before us for a special use permit before. Have we acted on any special use permits for single-family residences?
Sandy member, but it's been a long.
I can't say that we've had any specific to these sections of the code, but we have had single-family residences come before the planning board and town council. I can think of 161 Bufflehead. I'm sorry. That was probably a height issue. And then there was one on Snow Geese, actually 165 Bufflehead, that came to us because they were moving the house back and they were looking for a parking exception to the setbacks because they were moving the house back. So there are two that come to mind.
We've had some on, is it Marlin or Wampum?
I think it's Wampum.
Wampum. We had a couple on Wampum that were related to setbacks at the rear of the property.
But they weren't for parking.
But, yeah, I don't think you've had any residential. We've had them for commercial.
No, we have. We
but
have.
for these types of issues other than what Sandy's mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, 165 Bufflehead was definitely a parking special exception, but that may not have necessarily, it was probably coupled with another section of the code that relates to structures on the ocean, on the beach.
I think Wampum might have been also.
That was the increase of a nonconformity.
Yeah, that was not for parking, that was,
Yeah.
that was like a deck or a porch.
It
that
was a setback issue, yeah.
Most of these finished before the recent camera plan was finished?
No, this house was built subsequent to the plan.
Yes or no?
The house was built after the adoption of the latest plan.
Neighborhood input, do we have, is there a neighborhood association? Were they contacted? Have they given us their input?
Mr. Stormont is the Neighborhood Association president. His application included letters from 2 adjacent property owners expressing no objection. Beyond that, I've received 1 phone call from an adjacent property owner across the street, just inquiring as to what the subject matter was.
It looks like the house next door, would be 110, which is a new house also. This is 110B, that there is a front driveway issue there too, setback.
Not at 110. That's the property to the east. That was just recently built as well, and that's in compliance.
Really, because the driveway comes to the roadway the same,
It's got to come to the roadway. The question is whether it's more than,
well, setback, I think, but it looks like the setback is the same as this one.
they only have 8-foot setbacks. So trust me, we go through the survey process, and that house is in compliance.
They're not all the same.
And Joe, just to clarify, we're talking about these measurements, which are shown on the survey at the property line. And that's what the code deals with as the curb cut, not where it ties into the actual edge of pavement
That's correct.
or gravel.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
I have some additional questions, but they're to the owner.
Okay. I think he's inviting you to step.
Dave, when you get up there, will you please state your full name and address for the record?
Sir, you want my address where I live?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My full name's David Stormont. I live at 6036 Currituck Road. It's over in Martins Point. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Thank you, Planning Board. And Joe, you and your staff need to be commended on being very, very attentive in helping me get this packet put together in the proper form, and most appreciate all the help from staff. Did a great job. Did you want to ask me some questions, or you want me just to give you a little intro?
Just make your presentation first, and then I'll ask.
Okay. Well, Soundsea Village is the first development north of Duck platted. It was platted back in, I believe, in 1962. The developer was Walter Perry at the time. Duck Road, hard surface Duck Road, ended at Duck Church, and the road followed its way right down the edge of the Sound, all the way to approximately where the water sports is now, across the street from Soundsea Village. Soundsea Village has no pavement. It has gravel roads. They're private. They were maintained originally by the developer, Walter Perry. They was just basically sand roads, and with really no gravel on them either. I think Mr. Perry went out there and got some shale off the beach from time to time, but that was back in the 60s. and that was a long time ago. Mr. Perry sold all his property, was advancing in age, was not maintaining the roads. In fact, he was ill and beginning to decline in health. So he wanted to deed the streets to the homeowners. There was no HOA at the time. And imagine the confusion of trying to deed private streets to 103 different parcels, because that's how many parcels are in Soundsea Village. So myself and a couple of other residents at the time formed an HOA to be the entity to receive the streets from the developer. And our bylaws give us authority to do one thing as an HOA, and that's to maintain the streets. We have no architectural review boards. We don't have any standards as far as size of home that can be built or not built, as many other developments and HOAs have within the town of Duck. So it's pretty much been a wild and woolly ride and freedom. There are no architectural standards, so you'll find all kinds of different architectural styles in Soundsea Village. And you'll also find that the relief that we're looking for tonight, all three of those reliefs are probably found in more than one location in Soundsea Village already existing nonconformities, most of which occurred before the town was incorporated. So that's a brief history on Soundsea Village. As far as this particular house, my family bought that property in '67, and I inherited it from my mother in, 10 years ago, and been just holding it and to put a little cottage on it. And so that's what it finally happened when my son and daughter-in-law announced that they were going to move from South Carolina back to Duck because they wanted to plant their flag here. We have a lot of history in Soundsea Village. I said, okay, fine, now I know what to do with this piece of property. So we built a little home. Sandy gave us a temporary CO back on December the 22nd and got them moved in on a temporary CO right before Christmas. But in the process of designing this home to hit the setbacks properly, to make sure we don't go over on lot coverage, to honor all of the health department septic regulations that they made us bring in as far as amount of fill to bring in and the type of system that we had to put in, and moving that house around on the plat to try to save as many trees as we could. I don't know exactly how many photos you all have in your packet, but I prepared this site plan here with little red circles, and each one of those are represented by photos in your packet if you have them. But those little red circles represent mature oak trees that we were trying to preserve. So the house moved this way, but if we moved too far this way, we had to take a tree down. So we moved the house back, we moved this way, setbacks. Literally, we spent a lot of time trying to move this house around and preserve as many trees as we could, and we were able to do that. So that's the reason that that's the reason the driveways are the way they are, because in any other configuration, I would have had to mow down at least one mature oak tree. The septic field had to be moved from its original platted location by the health department. That would be, I think, picture 5. There it is right there, picture 4. That tree right there, no, back up, picture 4, there you go, right there, hole right there. That particular tree is located in the northwest corner of the property, and where the health department originally platted the septic field, I would have had to take that tree out because the septic tank was platted to go right where that tree is. So the decision was made to slide the septic field to the south enough to save that tree. That's the biggest tree on the site. In doing so, that eliminated my ability to do a curved driveway. With regard to the size of the driveways, the big driveway is 18 feet in width. Duck's regulations require that a parking space be defined as 9 foot wide by 18 feet in length. So as you can see on that site survey, there are 2 parking spaces on the big driveway. 9 times 2 is 18. That's how we came up with the width of the large driveway. The small driveway is 10 feet wide because it had to be at least 9 to accommodate a parking space. And we thought we could leave a little bit of room on each side. Obviously, the distance between the 2 driveways is as it's drawn at 10 feet because I'm trying to save the cluster of trees in front of the home. I couldn't bring the little driveway any further to the east because of tree number 5, and that's a large mature oak. So anyway, the attempt was to save as many trees as possible, which I think is what is a favorite thing for Duck. Let me see if there's anything else. To reduce the total aggregate from 28 feet back to 24 feet, we could probably slice off something on the small driveway, but the large driveway, in speaking with staff, they thought that a recommendation would be to slice off 2 feet on each side of the large driveway, which would reduce the 4 feet that we need. However, practically speaking, as you can see, if a parking space is at 9 feet wide and you put the car in reverse and begin to back out of the driveway, you quickly come to a 7-foot space. The chances are the car is going off the driveway. So I'm still going to appeal for that, but because I think it works. With regard to what's in the neighborhood, the house next door to me, there's a picture of that in your file, and the house across the street, there's a picture of that in the file. Both of those you can see by standing on my driveway, and you can see that there's one right there that is not in compliance before Duck Incorporated. Obviously, that house was built in 1969.
That's 121?
That is 108. That's 108. This one, there we go. This one is 113. That one was built in 1986. And it's non-compliant with all of the different requirements as well. There are other driveways within the community. Soundsea Village is a very rustic community. It's the only development in Duck that has gravel roads. And so it really is a beach look, the old beach look. So that's my presentation, Mr. Chairman. So if I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to do so.
I'm happy to agree with the staff recommendation regarding the total width. But I have some questions regarding the front setback. It seems to me that there would be no. It go off by itself. It seems to me that it would do no damage, even less damage, as you're describing the width issue, to comply with the town setback requirement, front setback of 5 feet as opposed to 2 feet, which it is now. Would you speak to that issue?
Not sure I understand the question. Right now,
It seems to me that it would do no damage to your driveway if it was a 5-foot setback as opposed to a 2-foot setback, 5 being the town standard.
I see what you're saying.
And you could do a pervious, it's now impervious, you could do a pervious surface, whether it's any number of pervious surfaces, that would solve other problems too. But speak to why do you think you need a 2, why is that objectionable to you?
Well, the 5-foot setback is measured from the rear of the parking space to the property line. That's the requirement. And where the front steps were coming off the front of the house on the original plan, they ran right into the tree. The tree number, I think it's number 1, It's in the tree that's between the driveways. So I ended up bringing the steps off to a pedestal and then cascading them down so they didn't intrude out into where the tree was. In doing so, that front pedestal pushed the parking space back 2 feet. That's the reason that we're not in compliance with the 5-foot front property line setback. However, if you look at that diagram and look to the street side of the front property line, you'll see there's 18 feet of space between the property line and the edge of the gravel road on Soundsea Avenue. So I did not think that pushing the cars back any closer to the property line would in any way be a public safety issue with folks walking down the side of the street, bicycles, baby carriages, or whatever, because there's 18 feet between the property line and the edge of the gravel road.
There's not 18 feet between the side of the road, the north side of the road, and the beginning of your concrete driveway.
There's 18 feet to his property line.
Between the edge of the roadway and there's 18 feet of right-of-way before you hit their front property line.
Oh, okay, that's different
Yeah,
than what I was
yeah,
saying.
that's what you say.
Thank you, Joe. Did that?
Yeah, that's different than the picture I was painting, which the concrete comes right up to the edge of the road.
Edge of
as
the
it is
gravel,
now.
yeah.
Edge of the gravel.
And 18 feet of that concrete is on Soundsea Avenue, private road right away.
Right,
It does, even though I paid for it, I don't own it.
got it.
And it's subject to, anytime there's utility work on the street, I would be subject to having that concrete driveway torn up, as anybody would, to replace water. We don't have sewer, we have septic tanks, so it'd be water, basically.
You've got an expansion joint in the concrete driveway that's roughly 2 feet north of the beginning of the concrete. You've got an expansion joint,
Okay, I'd have to go back and look.
roughly.
Yeah, okay. You mean 2 feet north of the property line?
No, I'm focused on the concrete driveway.
Okay.
If you look at the south edge of the concrete driveway,
Okay.
where it meets the gravel roadway,
Okay,
and go north 2 feet,
okay,
you've got an expansion joint in the concrete.
okay.
I mean, it seems as though you could easily, I guess what I'm getting around to is you could easily eliminate that reason for requesting an exception.
There should be 5 feet here. And there's only 2,
I've gotten further clarification and
Okay.
forget my objection. Forget my objection.
Yes, sir.
Which also fits with what Sandy said about the house next door, where it looks like the driveway comes right up to the street.
On that particular property, 110, that is a corner lot. So the setbacks that I have to honor, not being a corner lot, on the south, east, north, and west property lines, those setbacks would be different for the owner of the corner lot because it's a corner. They would have different setbacks from different areas, depending on what's determined, the front of the house, the side of the house, or whatever. And I'm not sure what Sherry Beecham went through with you guys to determine that. That might be one reason why the setbacks look smaller in one particular place or another. I don't know.
The objection raised by the staff looks reasonable to me, but you find it objectionable.
I just find it functionally difficult with keeping the vehicle on the driveway. being that the driveway is considered to be the width of 2 parking spaces by definition, 9 foot wide each. I had to allow at least 18 feet with 2 parking spaces next to each other because that would be the requirement. But imagine taking that car, either one of those 2 cars, and backing them up, and by the time you get to the property line, which is about, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet behind the cars, the driveway narrows down 2 feet on each side. Chances are you're going in the sand.
I have that problem with my own house. But
Do you?
I don't find it objectionable. You at the storm management meeting a couple of weeks ago, is there a, sorry, my mic is coming.
We're just gonna swap you out.
We can share.
I assure you that this one's working.
Is,
Yeah, I was there at the,
is there a flooding problem right near this house?
I don't have a big plat. East of the corner lot, 110, is Clay Street.
Right.
And then you go east of Clay Street down towards the ocean front. If you go down about 2 properties east of Clay Street, that is where the standing water issue comes on a major rain event. And it runs, I don't know, 4 or 5 houses to the east. And then as the topography begins to rise, as it comes up to the back of the sand dunes, then obviously the road's no longer flooded. But this property here has never flooded from either stormwater, overwash, from sound or ocean, and it has never had any standing water on it because of a major rain event. That whole area runs right along Clay Street. There's a slight topographical ridge in there, and that's the reason we built in there back in '67, because we saw that was the high point of the whole development. Back in '67, there weren't any houses, so it was easy to see where the high ground was.
Thank you, Dave.
Any other questions from the planning board or staff?
No.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it. Sandy, thanks for helping me get this packet together. And thank you.
Discussion among us.
I see staff's point, but I also see the applicant's point. It's kind of a moot point with a edge. If we cut the 2 notches out of the driveway, like it was suggested, you'd back off the driveway. How far was staff suggesting that notch would have to go to be satisfactory?
Yeah, obviously compliance would be to go, you could shave a foot off of the driveway to the left,
Right.
to the west to make that 9 feet, and then you would only need 6 inches on each side to achieve full compliance. The taper could continue into the right-of-way, but I guess what we're suggesting is that there's an ability to narrow that, and again, we just couldn't justify the wider width for the same reasons as we could justify the other 2.
How does it?
So they have some ability to do that. And again, if they were tapering it a little bit and continue that taper into the right of way, we would see they were making a good faith attempt to comply to the degree possible. Maybe they can't get 6 inches in that 2 feet, but if they get there, a little further down, it would be similar to a lot of the situations that we have in town.
So from a practical perspective, if we granted relief on the two items that staff has recommended and didn't on the third, I mean, we're not part of our, unless there was a condition in our resolution that was design specific, it would then be up to the applicant and staff to work out
That's correct.
what you've just discussed there.
Yeah, there may be other options that they prefer, and that's no problem. We'll work with them, but if that's what the board and ultimately the town council decides, then, then we would work with the applicant to make that happen. You would have to dictate a solution.
Joe, would we have the same concern if this was a pervious surface?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no difference in terms of these standards. It has nothing to do with stormwater management.
I think I can see that this is the most practical and workable driveway, I think, considering the trees, but I can also see staff's point that, it could be narrowed and that would make it a less convenient driveway, but, it could get closer to complying with the, Joe, if we don't grant that third for aggregate width with staff's discretion, working with the applicant, do they have to achieve 24, or is any reduction adequate?
They would have to achieve 24.
Okay.
So, you could, another option that the board and again, ultimately town council has is granting a lesser. You could say it seems reasonable to us that they could shave a foot off of the one driveway, but keep the other as it is, so you could grant them a lesser level of relief than what they've requested. In other words, you could find a compromise in there if you choose to do so.
So, for example, they could trim 1 foot to make this 9, and then we would be granting a 27. Or maybe they could even get another 6 and another 6 inches for 26.
I don't think we want to do that, but there
Right.
are ways that they
Right.
can achieve.
Well, but I'm saying if we were to pick a number as something to grant, he's saying that's an option. If we don't say you can leave it as it is, you reduce it to.
In other words, you're not limited to a yes or no. You could say there's a compromise or something in the middle, willing to grant this amount of relief. That may not be everything they're asking for, but it may not be everything staff that the ordinance requires either. In other words, you could pick, if you see a good number in there that seems to work, you could do that. You don't just have to say, yes, we grant it, or no, we don't.
Well, what about staff's recommendation, just leaving it at that? I would make a motion that we approve based on staff's recommendations.
Are you making a motion?
Yes, I would make it if you wanted to go that way. You think that's
Okay, so then we would be granting relief on 2 of the requests, but not the 3rd.
Two of the 3.
Yeah.
Gotta go somewhere with it. Yeah, what you say makes sense. To a degree.
I second the motion.
Okay.
Any questions on the motion? Is it clear that that the motion on the floor is to approve the staff recommendation, which is two of the 3 variables here. It is not approving item 3, which is to allow a combined aggregate drive aisle of 28 feet, where the maximum is 24 feet.
Correct.
At this point, it's, I mean, if it really clarifies something, yes, but at this point, we're in discussion and.
Joe brought up the third option that no one can discuss, and that was a reduction. Up until Joe's last discussion, it was thought by me that the option was 24 feet is the regulation of total aggregate width. We have 28. So the discussion up until a moment ago was we had to get rid of 4 feet.
Right.
Joe just made an alternate suggestion of perhaps the planning board would come up with a number that was not a 4-foot reduction, but something less than a 4-foot reduction. And I think that's what the discussion was. And so if I understand your motion, we're not considering Joe's reduction in aggregate from 4 feet to something less. We're doing a yes or a no on this. Is that right?
That's the motion.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I would amend the motion if the applicant has a number that they would like, but I don't feel like we can design it from here. But if you have a number, I would. And if it works out the way we do it, then we can do it again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sit here and design the layout here. That's not our role, and I don't want us to do that. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
The motion carries. And just to be clear, that we have approved the application for the special use permit with 2 of the requested allowances, which is allow parking spaces to be within 2.8 feet of the front property line where a 5-foot setback is required under section 156.092D, and 2, to allow reduction in the minimum separation of multiple drive aisles from 25 to 10 feet rather than 25 as required in the statute. That's it.
We're not out to shoot you down. Sir? We're not out to shoot you down. We're trying. Appreciate your time. Okay, move on.
Item number 4 on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I make a motion to approve the, what do you call it?
The minutes as presented of the March 8th, 2023 meeting.
Yeah.
I'll second. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
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 The motion carries 3-0. Staff comments, item number 5.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, as the most recent town council meeting, they were busy. It was a long meeting, but there were several items of interest to you. The council did grant approval of the special use permit for the outdoor entertainment at Scarborough Lane Shops. And they did accept all the conditions that the board recommended. There were also 2 text amendments, you'll recall, relating to lot coverage. And the council approved both of those ordinances with those changes per the recommendation of the board. And what else did they have? They had one other large item that Sandy dealt with, so I'll let you take the lead on that one with the beach. So, sorry, yeah.
So one of council's strategic planning items was to make sure we are enforcing our conditional use permits and our ordinances. So since COVID restrictions have been, or COVID allowances have been removed as of December 31st, 2022, we have been working with the businesses and running into what we're calling the post-COVID environment, lack of staff, increased prices, lack of housing, and some of the businesses are struggling and looking for some help, and so they have, in some instances, exceeded what they're previously approved for. So we're working through that with them, and we went to council to ask whether or not they wanted to afford staff flexibility working through that process. They did say yes, and we also noted some things in our ordinance that are not clear with regard to restaurants and not necessarily seating area, but waiting areas and how they should be treated in comparison to seating areas. So you can anticipate that staff will be bringing back some zoning text language to discuss regarding that. I do have at least one business that's looking towards an amendment to their conditional use permit, and I am meeting with several others. So we should have a pretty busy summer and fall, I would expect.
Sandy and Joe, could you comment on the discussion that I raised concerning this application? I mean, what's the rationale for looking at the setback requirement from the end of the parking as opposed to the street?
So the end of so you have, that right-of-way is not their property.
Right.
And so we always measure our setbacks from the property lines.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm not quite sure how.
So the right-of-way could vary greatly, and we have situations where the right-of-way, where a road isn't centered and the right-of-way moving down,
Well, I slightly misunderstood what we all were saying then. So
okay.
it's from the property line and not from the parking. What I heard, well, from the front steps. I mean, what I heard in our discussion here was the steps of the house. And it was a problem because they moved the steps.
They did. When we originally approved this project, their parking was notably in compliance, and we made a comment about the width not exceeding 20 feet. The staff report is slightly off a little bit. We actually, Jim Gould and I were out, noticed that a double driveway had been put in. We're like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem like that was something we approved because it wouldn't meet our ordinance. So we came back and confirmed that there was some inconsistencies with what was originally approved. One of the things that happened as they were adjusting to try and accommodate these trees was they changed the step orientation. That change in steps, shifting to the right, impacted the length that they had previously proposed, and therefore they no longer had 25 feet, because you technically, from your property line to your house, you need 25 feet in order to get, or actually 23 feet, in order to meet that 18-foot parking requirement and that 5-foot setback. So they're just off by a few. And, staff felt like the preservation of the trees is important in the town of Duck, but we could not approve what they had changed without review from us. If they had come to us and said, hey, we want to do this, we probably could have worked something out. But honestly, after going out on site several times, very difficult situation with the location of those trees that he wanted to preserve.
No, I agree, given the location of the trees, I think that was a good option. I was just thrown by the front setback requirement.
Well, and that was, we talked with Mr. Stormont about his options, and, the special use permit was one option. A zoning text amendment, if staff wasn't behind this, it's likely he would have come to planning board with a zoning text amendment request, because he doesn't see why you have to be set back 5 feet from the property line when the property line is 18 feet off the gravel, off the roadway. With that being said, Jim and I are dealing with another parking situation where the right-of-way is only 5 feet. So that separation that was desired when the ordinances were updated back in 2004 varies tremendously. And Soundsea Village is one of those communities where you have small lots, and while they may have 18-foot setbacks or right-of-ways, there's a lot of properties in Soundsea Village that park right there. So that would be, and I explained to Dave, I said that's going to be a harder task to have change, because you're not just looking at a single property, you're looking at the entire town of Duck.
Yeah.
If you're looking at changing something like that.
I mean, I understand his point, because it's hard to look at the site and the property as I did, and see how the setback really jives with, because it's far enough back, and it's the property line, I wasn't considering the right-of-way. And it just seemed like an easy solution, because as I said, the expansion joint in the concrete is about 2 feet back from the road, and you could easily chop off, 2 feet, just a giveaway.
We often get people confused about that.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to share?
Just a few project updates. Duck Trail improvements between Blue Heron and Waxwing are underway. I do anticipate they will be complete by the end of April. The Magdalene arrived Monday afternoon, and I believe started pumping sand yesterday on our beaches. So beach nourishment is finally underway. They are anticipating approximately 39 days to complete that. That is taking into consideration weather delays, equipment maintenance, and any other things that could come up. Last thing is,
Did they start on the south end of the
they
special,
started,
near the pier?
the subline is located at Diane Street, so the plan was to develop Diane Street so they're, and slightly to the south, so they have a work zone that they can work from and have all their equipment, and they're going to move north, and then they'll flip and move south.
Are they not going to do the taper for Southern Shores?
I don't know that answer.
'Cause they
I have
haven't.
not been involved in those discussions. I understand that part of the plan was to bring more sand to Southern Shores as a result of some inconsistencies with the volume. And that, I believe, is also one of the reasons why we were able to get access through Southern Shores. But I don't have that definitively. That would be a question for someone like Drew. We also have 2 phases of our Resilient Coastal Communities program finishing up. Many of you were at our March 30th public outreach, which was for phase 3, which deals with a neighborhood stormwater study for 5 focused areas that have seen repetitive loss, and they're also part of our stormwater management discharge plan. That report will likely be going to council in May, and I expect we'll have discussions as to how that's going to be released, whether it's going to be released before the council meeting or whether it'll release at the council meeting. But I do have, that should be coming forth very soon. We also went back to phase 2 Resilient Coastal Communities program and worked on bolstering that plan. We only had 5 priority projects previously, and now we're looking at 15. We had a little open house today about that, and part of that bolstering was primarily through work with staff, but We got it out to the public today. We only have a small window of 10 days to get comments on priorities. So I would encourage anyone listening and the planning board to jump online and take the survey so that we can help to prioritize these additional projects. And that is also anticipated to go to council in May. They're going to be, they thought April was hard. May is going to be longer. And I actually have copies of the updates for the planning board tonight, as well as a QR code to take you directly to the survey. And I think that might be it.
You got it? Thank you.
Oh, and we'll be welcoming 2 new planning board members at May.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Joe. Board comments. I'll make just a couple. At our next board meeting, we will welcome 2 new board members. And they're here this evening, but they are as spectators or citizens, and we'll welcome them at our next meeting, in which they will join us. The bylaws, the planning board bylaws require the planning board to give an annual report to the town council, and I've had that discussion with the mayor, and I was originally planning to do that at the May meeting, but now I won't be in town for the May council meeting, so we've pushed that back to June. And that annual report is in the works. And the staff is working on part of that, and I'm sure as I pull it together, I'll have some comments, but the major thrust of it is going to be looking at all the projects and the disposition of all the projects in the last year that we have approved, or the disposition of all projects.
Is that something we have to vote on, approval like minutes before it goes to council, or?
I don't think so, because it's a report of what we've done, so I don't think so.
Okay.
Any other board comments? No. Hearing none, is there a motion for adjournment?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and properly second. I'm not sure who moved it and who seconded it. Did you move it, Joe? And you seconded it, Mark?
Yeah.
Just for the
I
record?
have a standing motion. Anytime I hear you whispering again.
All right. Thank you. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor of adjourning for the evening, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The meeting is adjourned.